हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
प्रभु जय श्री प्रभुपाद।
जय श्री प्रभुपाद।
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी।
माता जी दंडवत प्रणाम।
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
बद्धा माता दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम। जय श्री प्रभुपाद।
हिमांशु प्रभु दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम। जय श्री
प्रिया
प्रभुपाद।
मोहन देवी दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
दंडवत प्रणाम प्रवीण माता जी। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी।
समीर प्रभु दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
नीलिमा माता जी दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी।
नरेंद्र प्रभु दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्णा प्रभु जी, जय श्रीला प्रभुपाद, दंडवत प्रणाम।
कृष्ण माता जी दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
सुंदर प्रभु दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम। श्री
नंदी
प्रभुपाद।
सुंदर देवी दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
दंडवत प्रणाम प्रभु जी। हरे कृष्ण।
श्रीनिवास प्रभु दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी, दंडवत प्रणाम।
आनंद गिरिधारी प्रभु दंडवत प्रणाम। हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी। Okay, so I guess we will begin here. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरू श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितं च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमस्तुते। तप्त कांचना गौरंगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांता स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्यईश्वरम्। Okay, we'll cover the Bhagavad Gita chapter 1 and 2. Next week, we will cover chapter 3 and 4. We will release the first assignment, which is based on Bhagavad Gita chapter 1, 2 and 3 next week. As I discussed in the group, the assignments are open book. You can refer to presentations, you can refer to Bhagavad Gita, and you can answer. It is recommended that we answer the assignments in our own words, so that way when we read and then when we write in our own words, we get a deeper understanding of that. There are 4 assignments in Bhagavad Gita: 1 to 3 assignment 1, 4 to 6 assignment 2, and then 7 to 12 assignment 3, and 13 to 18 assignment 4. These discussions will cover most of the important topics that will help us with our assignments and exams. We won't be going in detail. We won't be going in each verses. The assumption of this overview session is everyone has at least once read Bhagavad Gita and at least once heard Bhagavad Gita and guidance of devotees. That is the assumption. And that's why we will just directly go with the concepts that are helpful for our exams and assignments, at the same time an overview. Okay, we will go to chapter 1, the observance of army. This chapter has 2 sections. The first section discuss about the preparation of war. Like there is this big breakdown is taken from a devotee, disciple of His Holiness Raghunath Swami Maharaj. His name is Gaurang Priya Prabhu. He has done analysis, very beautiful analysis of Bhagavad Gita. So the summary is taken from his presentations. So the first section has 3 subsections where there is preparation for war, where we see it begins with Dhritarashtra inquiring when the Kauravas and Pandavas assembled to fight, what did they do? Then there is a description of how Duryodhana is speaking to Drona and Bhishma Dev and kind of giving them inspiration using political means. Details are there in the purports, so that they enthusiastically fight because Duryodhana knows that they have a soft corner and they love Pandavas more, but they are fighting from the side of Kauravas because they are bound by duty. And especially for Bhishma Dev, he has a vow that he will support the king, but he wants them to fight to his full vigor. So he is using politics by mentioning, see how the son of Drupal has, because he know that Dronacharya has contention with Drupal, so using the word Drupal. So basically, he is one of the example. Duryodhana is one of the example who is using his material intelligence to win, and Arjuna is an example who is using his devotional intelligence to fight, not to win, but to do his service for the pleasure of Lord Krishna. So there is those description, and then there is a sign of victory. We have one slide. The next slide describes the various signs of victory of Pandavas. And then the third section is 21 to 27, where Krishna acts as Bhakta Vatsala. In this particular, it shows how Krishna is affectionate towards his devotee Arjuna. And Arjuna says, Krishna, please take my chariot. He has become the chariot driver, and willing to fulfill the desires of Arjuna, take me in between. And he is doing whatever his devotee says. And also when devotees need help, he is helping him with knowledge, with strength. So that aspect comes out in those verses, in those 7 verses. So this is first section, and second section, Arjuna gives 5 reasons not to fight. This devotee should learn by heart. There is one reason, compassion. How can I kill my own family members? Second reason, I mean, we don't need to remember the verses, but if we know the reasons, and if we can say all the reasons in 2 lines, that's sufficient. Then there is enjoyment, that the enjoyment will be tainted by blood. And he gives a reason that when all the family members dies, then even if you become the king, it won't be pleasurable because we know we have won this kingdom by the blood of our own family members, by the blood of our own grandfather, our own Dhanurvidya Guru, who is Dronacharya. So there will be no pleasure even if we win such a kingdom. Then by killing, we will incur sinful reactions and we will be destined for hell. Then there is destruction of family traditions where the males will die and women, being soft-hearted and can be exploited by unscrupulous men. Unwanted progeny will come. They would not offer the pindas to their ancestors, and because of which the ancestors will dwell in hell. And I'm assuming everyone knows the concept of pinda, which is when the food is offered once in a year, offered to Lord Vishnu, and when it is offered to the Pitras who live in Pitralok. Pitralok is the waiting area before one gets the required punishment for good or bad karma one has performed. So before one goes to Yamaraj, there is a waiting area which is Pitralok, where people can reside for sometimes thousands of years also. And in that Pitralok, there is no food or water, although the desires are there, and it's a state of suffering. And they remain there sometimes endlessly, suffering without fulfilling their desires. So it becomes the responsibility of the descendants, the qualified descendants, to offer Mahaprasad of Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu, because devotional service, the reason they are suffering is because of their past sinful activities. And the way one can overcome one past sinful activities is by devotional service, and the devotional service that they receive is Mahaprasad, and when they eat Mahaprasad, that reduces their sinful, that first satisfies them, and secondly reduces their sinful karma that is making them stay there, so that they can soon get a birth. So if the pindas are not offered, then it's a lot of suffering for those ancestors lying in Pitralok. And there Prabhupada mentions that those who are chanting Hare Krishna, there is no need to offer pindadan, because instead of once in a year rendering devotional service on their behalf, whatever devotional service we render goes to the ancestors. And Prabhupada says, like the ancestors dance in joy when someone takes a devotional service. So naturally, when the children born are based on the combined consciousness of father and mother, and when the father is unscrupulous or he has a tendency to exploit the widows, the children who will be attracted will be of very sinful disposition, and they will not care for any family tradition, and the family traditions will be destroyed and ancestors will suffer. Therefore, I don't want to fight. So these 4 reasons, and the 5th reason he gives in the beginning of 2nd chapter, where Arjuna says, if I fight and if I win, then there is no pleasure, because so much sinful reaction, enjoyment tainted by blood. If I fight, if I lose, then I die. And if I don't fight, then I will not get any land to rule. And I'm a Kshatriya by nature, which is also a state of suffering based on my nature, Arjuna thinks. So whether he fights, he wins, or he loses, or he doesn't fight, he is not sure what is the right thing. He's seeing losses everywhere. So that's where he surrenders to Krishna, telling Krishna, please guide me what is best for me. So this is a summary of the 1st chapter. These are some of the signs of victory that are mentioned. Supreme Personality of Godhead is a chariot, is a charioteer. So naturally, where Krishna is present, Dharma will win, and they will win. Krishna is Rishikesh, directly controls the sense of pure devotees. So he is there to guide Arjuna in all directions, which he did. Goddess of Fortune, whenever and wherever The Lord is present, she is present, and if fortune is present, naturally, if one is fortunate, they will win. So she never lives without her husband. So all fortune is guaranteed because fortune arises from goddess of fortune, and if Krishna is there on the side of Pandavas, then their fortune is guaranteed. Kurukshetra is a holy place and it will impact uh, um, or positively influence dharma and negatively influence adharma. We see when we come to temple, it is conducive for our spiritual life. When we go to a place which is very thick with mode of ignorance and passion, it is very unconducive. So naturally, Kurukshetra is a holy place. Then Hanumanji is there, also helped Lord Ram in gaining victories. Or Hanuman is in the form of flag, then he will also help Arjuna in winning the battle. Conch shell is a symbol of Vishnu. So when the war is starting or ending with a conch shell, because symbol of Vishnu, Vishnu means Krishna, means Dharma will win because they are always on side of Dharma. I mean, they are Dharma. This is indirectly indicated by Bhishma and Pandava's conch shell. Anywhere conch shell comes, it's a symbol of Vishnu. Then Krishna's and Arjuna's conch shell mentioned as Divya, transcendental, whereas other conch shell are just referred by conch shell. So that shows, so that's one sign. Bhishma's conch shell to pacify Duryodhan, it says. It is Bhishma when he blew his conch shell just to pacify Duryodhan. Agni Dev, chariot given to Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita explains it was capable to conquer all directions. That's a sign of victory. And then there is shattering of hearts. Conch shell of Pandava shattered Kaurava's heart, but there is no such mention of Pandava's heart being shattered when Bhishma and Duryodhan blow their conch shell or Dronacharya blow their conch shell. And the reason is Pandavas have faith in Krishna, confidence in Krishna, so nothing happened to them. But it is mentioned when Krishna blew their conch shell, Duryodhan's heart was shattered. So that's a sign that they're going to lose. Then practical application of the section 2, which is the 5 reasons that Arjuna gave why he doesn't want to fight, is identification with and attachment to the body disables one from executing his religious duties. Because he was attached on a bodily platform, he became weak to follow dharma. He was unable to do his own duty out of attachment. Just like Bharat Maharaj, out of attachment to deer, was unable to do his duty to Vishnu. And Arjuna was unable to do his duty to Krishna because of his attachment, but Krishna was there with him to guide him and help him come out of that attachment. And we see even Dhritarashtra was unable to do his duty to dharma because of his attachment to Duryodhan. So how attachment stops us from doing our either varnashram duty or duty to Supreme Lord, which arises because of identifying oneself with the body, and those we are attached to their body, and assumption of that relationship to be a real relationship, which actually it's temporary. The real relationship is only with Krishna. So identification with and attachment to bodily disables one from executing his religious duty, which is ultimately to execute Krishna's will. Ultimately, the purpose of one ashram is also to please Krishna. Otherwise, it is said even those duties are considered as shrama, or the time is wasted. But ultimately, everything is meant to please Krishna. It is interesting to analyze the cause and effect of Arjuna's bewilderment. It is brought on by seeing in terms of one's own self-interest. The reason Arjuna was bewildered because he was keeping himself in the center. I will suffer, or and he is my relatives will die. that, and the kingdom will be tainted by blood, although he has killed so many soldiers earlier. And he has won so many kingdoms earlier because they are Kshatriya. This is not the first battle he is fighting. I mean, he is the best of the archer. He has fought many battles before also. But it is now relatives came into picture, so he became weak. So it is based on one's own self-interest, and even he is giving reasons like loss of family tradition. Where was the loss of family tradition when he fought other battles? There was a loss. So because anytime male die, these things will come. So it is the reasons are being used here, which seems to be very nice reasons. But the main hidden purpose is one's own weakness of heart, which is arising from one's own attachment. But it is taken many forms. So ultimately, it's a selfish concern. So we can analyze this based on why Arjuna was bewildered is one's own self-interest. The result of such vision is fear, loss of composure, indecision, confusion when there are such things of one's own concerns, one's own selfish motives are in the forefront. Then one is not sure what to do, what not to do, what is right, what is wrong. One cannot understand. Because one will always be confused because one place one has heard about what is dear to Krishna, other place one is held back by what is dear to me. And one becomes confused, just like Arjuna was confused. Like, I don't know what to do. Because he knows, well, this is the right thing to do, but then at the same time, I cannot execute it. So that creates confusion, indecision, one loses composure, bewildered, and we see in the second chapter that's why one needs a spiritual master because one is absorbed in one's own self-interest, in I and my consciousness, in my being the center, and that creates everything, the whole spiritual life of confusion. And it's difficult to see out of the box, and that's why there's a guidance needed that helps to walk straight on that path. So there is the result of such vision is fear, obviously, because when there is attachment and when a particular religious duty takes away what I am attached to, then there is a fear of losing, fear of future, uh, fear of results. So all these things were visible in Arjuna's consciousness. So that's how some of the practical things that we can learn from the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Then here are some verses. These presentations will be shared with everyone. You all can refer to them before assignments and exams. They will be helpful. Various reasons and how Lord Krishna refutes those particular reasons in second chapter. So that's the end of the, okay. And Srila Prabhupada ends by saying, such a kind and soft-hearted person is fit to receive self-knowledge. There is one aspect of Arjuna that he is exhibiting selfish concerns. Another aspect of Arjuna is, although they are defined as aggressors who deserve to be killed, he is still thinking of their welfare. He still has that thought of my brothers. That soft-heartedness is still there. He, by nature, he is supposed to rule, but he is willing to go away and renounce because he doesn't want to kill them, even those who are aggressors. So at such so there is a pure devotee, yet at the same time it is said Arjuna was influenced by Yogamaya energy of Krishna so that Bhagavad Gita can be spoken. But he is an eternal associate who appeared in the past as Nara Narayan Rishi. Nar is Arjuna and Narayan is Krishna, who fought with Sahasrara, who in the next life came as Karna, given by some god. So he is very kind. Like Duryodhana is not thinking because he's hard-hearted. So he's not thinking so much bloodshed will happen because Duryodhana is taken by one's own desire to win the kingdom. So when one becomes selfish by motive, then one does not see the harm or inconvenience one causes to others, because one is selfishly motivated to do one's thing, and others' pains are not visible. And this desire to enjoy actually makes us hard-hearted or steel-framed. But Arjuna is seen to be very soft-hearted because um, people are more important to him than um, his own success, his own enjoyment, his own opulence, his own power, his own fame. But others' pain is more important to them. So both angles are there. And at one point, Prabhupada says to give us a general teachings of the effect of attachment and selfish concerns. On the other hand, Arjuna's purity. So those who are kind, those who are soft-hearted, simple people, they are fit to receive um, the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. And that's why Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. So with that, we come to the end of first chapter, which is very simple. The second chapter is way more complex than the first chapter. The second chapter has 5 divisions. There is Arjuna's further doubts and surrender to Krishna, where we discuss first. Krishna starts speaking that you are an Aryan. And who is an Aryan? Aryan is one who knows the goal of life is Vishnu. Gatim hi Vishnu. One's goal of life is Vishnu. He is an Aryan. And an-Aryan is one who thinks something material is the goal of life. So Arjuna is an Aryan, and he is supposed to act from a spiritual perspective. Then how he is speaking such words, which, like, he's a very learned man, and he's speaking like a very learned man, and he's Aryan, he's a pure soul, self-realized soul. Then Krishna is surprised how these words are coming from his mouth. And that further bewilders Arjuna, because Arjuna was in a mood that I have convinced Krishna that I should not fight and my reasons are very strong. But when Krishna expressed surprise, Kuto, how can this happen to you? Then Arjuna was even further bewildered, and he even questioned in a way that how can I kill Drona and Bhishma, my teacher and my great grandfather, who are worthy of my worship? Or will you, like in a commentary Prabhupada says, will you kill your own guru, who is actually guru of 64 arts? Again, Sandipani Muni was also not like a spiritual master, although we say guru, but he taught 64 arts. There's I mean, there are various kinds of gurus. Like Dhanurvidya guru for them is Dronacharya. So indirectly is asking question: will you, to Krishna, will you kill those who are worthy of your worship, like Sandipani Muni? And then after speaking, he expressed, then he became further lamented, and he said, Hare Krishna, I really don't know what do I do. And that's when the 6th verse, he expressed the last reason, the 5th reason, which is indecision. And then he breaks down. Then he theoretically knows Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead. He does accept in that way also, but at the same time, the feeling of him being his friend is more prominent to Arjuna than him being Supreme Personality of Godhead. And we see that later on in after universal form, in the 11th chapter, Arjuna admits that Devala, Asita, Vyasadev have told me, and now I agree. Now, obviously, they didn't come and tell him in between the Mahabharata, in between the Bhagavad Gita was spoken, which was only 45 minutes, and the time stopped at that time. So he is already aware, but the prominent thing that stands for him is the friendship. But when he saw the universal form, then the reverence came into forefront. And he's like, Krishna, please forgive me. And then he again became friendly, because naturally with pure love, the identifying Krishna Supreme Personality of God, it reduces, and the relationship is more important. So that's why he is in that mood also. But here in the 7th verse, he comes in a mood of reverence also, because he knows that Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead. So but he doesn't specifically mention, but he says Krishna, I surrender to you. And there Prabhupada describes on how one is perplexed in the material life, who don't know the real problem to solve is death, birth, old age, disease, and death. And people, instead of solving this problem, they are trying to look for sense gratification, improve economic development, sense gratification. People, instead of trying to solve the real problems of death and after death and disease, and a full stop to all these problems, they are thinking of how to improve my sense gratification, economic development. So Prabhupada says, usually people are misdirected in this direction. That's why they need a guru, so they can, like, why do we need a guru? Because one can solve the real problems of life. So this is the first section, which is Arjuna's further doubts and surrender to Krishna. He accepts Krishna as guru. Krishna smiles because now he takes the position of authority. At the same time, it is mentioned that one should not give knowledge to a deaf ears. If somebody is not willing to listen, then no point in speaking. But if somebody is surrendered, then it's good to speak and give knowledge. That's what Krishna did. But if somebody is speaking, Krishna didn't give knowledge, but Krishna still spoke to Arjuna, like, how have these impurities come upon you? So he didn't give knowledge, but he provoked Arjuna. He wanted Arjuna to come to the point of becoming ready, humble to listen, accepting the authority of Lord Krishna, and be ready to receive the knowledge. So if somebody is speaking many things, one can provoke or bring them to the point so they become eager to hear. And when they're eager to hear, when they are receptive to transcendental knowledge, then Bhagavad Gita will have effect on their consciousness. So this is some reflection from Arjuna's further doubts and surrender to Krishna. Then next 4 sections, we will cover them in little bit more detail today. One is Gyan Yoga, which is Krishna speak about how there is no death for the soul, where he was like, how can I kill my own family members? So Krishna refutes that by saying, well, you cannot kill them because they are eternal. Then there is Karma Kanda, there is Buddhi Yoga, and there is Sthita Pragya. Now, as I said, second chapter is one of the longest chapter and one of the very complex chapters to actually understand. So Karma Kanda section is where Krishna tries to convince Arjuna based on material benefits. Like, well, if you fight, the doors to heavenly planets will open. If you don't fight, people will speak unkind words against you. For a man who is honored, dishonor is worse than death. People will think you are a coward. People will not think that you left the battle out of your soft-heartedness. They will think you were scared of Duryodhana and Bhishma and others, and that's why you left the battle. So Krishna is trying to convince with a material intelligence. This is Karma Kanda section, which is a lower philosophy that Krishna gave to spoke because Arjuna's reason was on a material levels. So Krishna, being an expert, convinced Arjuna first from a material platform, and then he raised the bar. So that's why first is Karma Kanda, fight. Karma Kanda consciousness, by performing prescribed duties, gain material enjoyment, material gains. So Krishna says, well, if you fight, you will become the king. You enjoy the unrivaled kingdom, Arjuna. And even if you die, you attain heavenly planets. All good fortune upon you. So this is like actually quite against what we hear. But Krishna spoke Karma Kanda section also. Material losses, infamy, sin, if you don't fight, see what all will come. So convincing him from fruitive perspective. That's what material world is. The whole material world is Karma Kanda. Everybody speaks from selfish or everybody try to convince others what they should do, what they should not do based on gains and losses. This is all Karma Kanda. The whole world is kind of consumed by this karma kind of philosophy of I, me, mind, the center. And then Krishna raises the bar and he speaks about Buddhi Yoga. We will see some of the things Krishna speak in those 14 verses of Buddhi Yoga, which Prabhupada sometimes relate to Bhakti Yoga also. And there is Nishkam Karma Yoga, like obviously Karma Kanda has a portion of Sakam Karma where you're doing your activity but you are attached. Buddhi Yoga, he speaks about fight without considering gain or victory or loss, happiness or distress. Fight for the sake of fighting. And Prabhupada takes Buddhi Yoga or Nishkam Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga in the purport. So Krishna speaks fight for the sake of fighting without considering gain or defeat, and Prabhupada takes one level up and he says fight for the pleasure of Krishna. So this is the greatness of Prabhupada. From chapter 1 verse 1 he connects everything to pure devotional service. Yet Krishna knows that Arjuna is not ready for pure devotional service yet. So he is speaking to Arjuna based on principles of different yoga ladders. Understanding the different yoga ladders is also very important for all of us. So okay. So but without any, so there is a Nishkam Karma Yoga that he describes, and the last is Sthita Pragya, which is also a very important section where Arjuna asks questions like about self-realized soul, how does he sit, how does he walk, how does he act, how does he speak, what are his general characteristics, and Krishna answers them in a very appropriate way, and it's another complex section to understand. So that's what various things in this chapter makes this chapter quite complex. This is a yoga ladder. These slides will be given to all the devotees and they can remember them. Karma Kanda, then Sakama Karma Yoga, which is performing one's prescribed duties with attachment to results, then performing one's prescribed duties without attachment to results, then Jnana Yoga, then Ashtanga Yoga, which will be covered in 6th chapter, then there is Bhakti Yoga. So this is a yoga ladder. Devotee should be able to explain the yoga ladder. And now we come to the first one we saw where he becomes confused, indecision, he accepts Krishna as his guru, and then the first information Krishna gives is the understanding of the soul. Krishna says individuality is never lost. This verse is very important also. All living entities are eternal and continue their individuality in future without interruption, therefore no limitation for death. This is the verse that refutes Mayavad philosophy. The purport of this verse is also very important because Prabhupada speaks about in detail about Mayavad philosophy and how this particular verse refutes Mayavad philosophy, because basically Mayavad philosophy says we are super soul. There is no another soul within the body. In other words, we are God. It's just we are covered by illusion. When we become free from illusion, then we join back into Brahman, and that's the supreme, and we lose our identity. But here Krishna says there was never a time when we did not exist, nor in the future shall any one of us cease to be, and we are eternal. So when we are eternal, we can never lose our identity. And there is, a lot can be said, but the purport will give us deeper reflection, which we are not discussing. But you all are recommended to read the detail of Mayavad philosophy. Then Arjuna may argue, but change of body is still a cause of lamentation. Krishna says, well, change of body is as natural as change of boyhood to youth to old age. Nobody laments for such a natural change. So Arjuna may argue, but we do lament for the loss of youth. When we become old, we do lament, oh, youth, I looked so nice, or I was so young, or I was so like active, and now I cannot do. So one does lament for when one loses youth and come to old age. Then Krishna refutes, but Bhishma and Drona will get fresh bodies, which can be heavenly birth or spiritual bodies. Therefore, there is no lamentation. If they die, Prabhupada says, giving up old and useless body, accepting new body, it's a gain anyways. Then one example can be given is Jayati traded his old age for a fresh, youthful body, which was a cause of rejoicing. So if Bhishma and Drona, they give up their old body and get a new, beautiful body, then that's beneficial. So Arjuna may think, but attachment to current body of relatives will still be a cause of lamentation. Well, yeah, that is true. They may get a new bodies, and that is more conducive because old bodies become old and useless. But then what about those loved ones who care for them? And Krishna says we should learn to tolerate them. There is no choice but to tolerate such non-permanent dualities because things are going to change and they arise from sense perception. Krishna established soul is eternal, body is temporary, implies Kauravas cannot escape death even if Arjuna does not kill them. They are still going to die anyways because death is permanent, death is certain. Then Arjuna may argue, but violence incurs sinful reaction. Then Krishna refutes, violence under my direction does not incur any sinful reaction. So there are various reasons that Krishna speaks about the soul, and devotees should be able to establish from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita, this section. How will you prove that we are not a body but a spirit soul, and what all different things Krishna speaks about, the characteristics of a soul? This devotees can refer to this section for more details. And then coming to the third last section for today, which we already discussed a little bit, there is Karma Kanda, which is Arjuna, you should fight because fortunate are those Kshatriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come, opening for them the doors for liberation. So, if you neglect your duty, then you will incur sinful reactions, as we discussed in the summary. So that section is mentioned in these 8 verses. Practical application of this section: material happiness comes from proper execution of one's dharma. Neglect of dharma means material fall down. So if one performs one's duty, material happiness will come. And if one neglects one's duties, distress will come. Link between the Gyan Yoga section, which is Krishna speaking about the knowledge of the soul, and Karma Kanda section, which is speaking about the benefit of fighting from a material platform. In the previous section, Krishna used argument based on Gyan, which is knowledge of the soul, to induce Arjuna to fight, because you are considering them to be your relatives and them to be physical bodies, but this is not so. So he is inspiring that the soul is eternal. Your weapons cannot be touched by any weapon, fire, water, because Arjuna is going to release fire weapon, he is going to release water weapon, he is going to release whatever he's going to release. None of those things can touch your relatives because they are spirits. So this is a Gyan principle, that the first thing that Krishna is using to convince Arjuna to fight. Now Krishna will use less elevated principles. As I said, as we discussed, Karma Kanda is not something we propagate, but Krishna will use that principle, one which promise a material reward. This section elaborates on text 2.2, in which Krishna says that avoidance of duty leads not to higher planets but to infamy. So here are, as a Kshatriya, it's your dharma. Don't hesitate to do your duty. Such opportunities open doors to heavenly planets. Otherwise, incur sin for neglecting one's duty, lose your reputation as a fighter. People will speak of your infamy. They will call you coward, or you ran away from the battle out of fear only. Conclusion: you will either win heavenly planets if you die, or you should fight because you cannot give up your duty. Otherwise, they will scorn your abilities with with by calling you coward and out of fear and other things. So there is, and it's your dharma, you have to follow your dharma. So there is no option for you not to fight. And if you fight, don't worry about winning or lose, because you will either attain the entire sovereignty of earthly kingdom to rule, or you will go to heaven. So it's all good and great and best. So you should fight. This is first level of conviction from Karma Kanda section. And then this is now Krishna raises the standard and speaks about Buddhi Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Nishkam Karmi Yoga. This is the second last section. Basically, it's from 39 to 53, and 54 to 72 is Sthita Pragya. Sthita Pragya is a self-realized soul, and what are the characteristics of self-realized soul. And this section deals with working without thinking of whether you get heaven or what will people speak about you, infamy or faming, or fame or infamy, heavenly planets or earthly kingdom, or what will be the result, good or bad. But you do your duty because it is your duty to fight. So this is called Nishkam Karmi Yoga. Nishkam Karmi Yoga is not Bhakti Yoga. Nishkam Karmi Yoga is without calm, without material desires. Higher than Karma Kanda is Nishkam Karmi Yoga. Sakam Karmi Yoga is basically doing it for fruitive activities. So Krishna goes from Karma Kanda, Sakam Karmi Yoga to Nishkam Karmi Yoga. Freedom from bondage of work. If you work like how Prabhupada relates all these verses is to Bhakti Yoga. Krishna speaks like Prabhupada speaks every verse, he gives a purport from Bhakti Yoga. And that's what we see from Chaitanya Charitamrita, that every single verse of Bhagavad Gita is devotion to Radha and Krishna. Advaita Acharya would give purport based on that. So entire Bhagavad Gita is Bhakti Yoga. And that's the greatness of our, that's why we can hear Bhagavad Gita only under guidance. Otherwise, like many people write different versions of Bhagavad Gita and they present it only from external perspective. But we see how Prabhupada brings Bhakti Yoga and pleasure to Krishna in any verse you read. So although Nishkam Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga are two different on the yoga ladder, there are two different elements, because Nishkam Karma Yoga is performing our duty for the sake of doing our duty, because it is our dharma, I should do it. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what the result will be in the future. It doesn't matter what will be the consequences. I'm supposed to do it, I must do it. This is Nishkam Karma. It becomes Bhakti Yoga when I'm doing it for the pleasure of Krishna. When Krishna element is added, it becomes Bhakti Yoga. So this section, like how we generally interpret the entire section, is from the perspective of Bhakti Yoga, and that's how we explain it also. That's why I said slash Buddhi Yoga / Bhakti Yoga / Nishkam Karma Yoga. There is differences, but for us they're all the same, because everything is dotted around pleasing and serving Krishna. So what is the benefit? If somebody asks what is the benefit of Nishkam Karma Yoga or this section, or Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, then one can say freedom from bondage of work, because if we are working with fruitive action, then we become bound by the action and reaction. Anything we do, we are bound by the karma, good or bad. Even if we do one ashram system perfectly, we get good karma. Or if we engage sinful activities, we get bad karma. So no matter what we do in this world, the bondage to work is certain. But when it is done for the pleasure of Krishna, then or in devotional service, one becomes, there is freedom from bondage to work. No loss or diminution in this path. We hear Neha Bikramana Shastri, very famous verse. Why? Because there is no reaction. When there is no reaction, then like two ways to see it. As Nishkam Karma Yoga, there is no reaction, so there is no suffering, so there is no loss. Um, um, and another way to see it as on a path of bhakti, little advancement can save one from the greatest danger. What is greatest danger? Prabhupada described greatest danger is to glide down from human birth to other species. But little advancement guarantees a human birth, which is again spoken in the 6th chapter. So, like many times, whatever Krishna speaks has meanings at multiple layers. So, likewise, how Prabhupada explains all these verses is the meaning at the highest layer, which is pure devotional service, and how we are accustomed to hear all these meanings is from highest perspective, pure devotional service. Even Ashtanga Yoga, when we read 6th chapter, glorious Srila Prabhupada, and like perfect purpose Srila Prabhupada, he explains the entire process of Ashtanga Yoga from Bhakti Yoga perspective. Everything Prabhupada speaks from the perspective of Bhakti Yoga. Then resolute determination, we see the determination weakens if it is motive. Now, I'm speaking from both perspective. From Nishkam Karma Yoga perspective, the determination becomes weak when we are motivated by results. So when we are getting good results, we are very motivated to do that activity. And when the success is not there, then we become less motivated to do it. And that makes it sakama karma. But if one is driven to do it because it is my duty, I must do it, then one will be very determined to do it. And from Bhakti Yoga perspective, also, there is a resolute determination, which is the goal of life, which is going back to Godhead. And then, or resolute determination, those who are on this path, they are resolute in their determination. In other words, their goal is one, and that is to go back to Godhead. So from multiple layers, the same thing can be seen. Freedom from good and bad reactions. Naturally, we know Bhakti Yoga frees one from good and bad reaction. Just like we hear that when we bathe in Yamuna, both good and bad karma are removed. When we chant the holy names of Krishna, or when we circle around Tulasi, then good and bad reactions are removed. Then by becoming free from the karma cycle, one becomes entitled to escape the cycle of birth and death. What takes us next birth is the karma cycle. Then indifferent to Vedic rituals, like don't be attached to the flowery words of the Vedas. The path of Bhakti Yoga, realization of relationship with Krishna as an eternal servant, and then the last verse speaks about goes back to Godhead. So there are verse number written, and if devotees read those verses, I'm sure once you read those verses, you will see all this. Everything. You will recall everything. But at the same time, if somebody asks what are the benefits of Buddhi Yoga, then here is a summary that devotees can refer to. Then the other side of Nishkam Karma Yoga, Krishna speaks, he takes a detour. Many times Krishna speaks about Nishkam Karma Yoga, these are the benefits, but then somebody may not practice, and then they are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence. They say there is nothing more than this. Those who are karma kandis or sakama karma yogis, they are too attached to material opulence and sense gratification. Their goal is gain more material opulence and enjoy sense gratification on a daily basis. And they say the goal of life is to do this. And they have no resolute determination for devotional service. And we remember that verse. And their intelligence is many branched because they have multiple desires. I want this, were those who are on a path of devotional service or bhakti yoga. Now, same thing can be spoken. Everything can be related to Nishkam Karma Yoga also. That they are resolute in determination, but they are driven by sense gratification. They are not resolute in their determination for performing their duties. Like Arjuna was also apparently not exactly on the path of Nishkam Karma Yoga, and that's how we're speaking about the benefits. So that's why I said the chapter is a little complex, because it has multiple layers to it. But we see an entirety of this chapter and each and every verse from the perspective of Bhagavad Gita. Okay, now we go to the last section, which is a very important section, which is Sthita Pragya. You can remember this word, the symptoms of self-realized soul. Arjuna asked 4 questions. Arjuna asked 4 questions as to how to recognize a person situated in Krishna consciousness, self-realized soul, or Sthita Pragya, one in divine consciousness. Arjuna, 4 questions are: what are the general symptoms of one who is self-realized? How does he speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? Prabhupada says in the purport, most important symptom of a Sthita Pragya is how does he speak? And then Krishna answers, as you see, 55 to the end of the chapter is answering these 4 questions. So first Krishna answers the general characteristics of those who are Sthita Pragya or self-realized soul. He gives up all material desires for sense gratification, born of mental concoction. It is said that it is born of, Krishna uses the word born of mental concoction, because one feels this sense gratification will makes one happy. But actually only devotional service makes one happy, and the contact of senses with the sense object is a source of misery. That's why the perception of this is a source of happiness is born out of mental concoction. And a self-realized soul is freed from the desires, material desires for sense gratification. Then thus purified in mind, one finds satisfaction in the self alone. And impure mind, he will try to find happiness in sense gratification, but one whose mind is purified, he find happiness in the self, or he find happiness within himself, or he find happiness in devotional service. The example of Yamunacharya and Ambarish Maharaj, Yamunacharya said, I spit at the thought of sex life. He says that shows that he is a Sthita Pragya, a self-realized soul, who has no desire for sense gratification externally and who is satisfied within. And external world is very distasteful to him. It is also a symptom of a devotee on a stage of bhava, which is defined as virakti, or distaste toward material sense gratification. And we see Ambarish Maharaj being the king, how he would find his happiness in deity worship, which is also finding satisfaction in the self alone, because ultimately it comes from devotional service to Lord Krishna. So these are the general characteristics Krishna describes of Asthita Pragya. Then how does he speak? In the purport, Prabhupada describes how does he speak. It does not actually means that he moves his lips or he moves his tongue or how does he speak, but basically how does he speak? Prabhupada says how does he respond? So Krishna answers this question by saying that he is Sthita Dhira. Sthita Dhira means he is a man of steady mind, or equipoised. Like one time I remember there was one call by, I think it was Radha Ashtami lecture by this Maharaj from Mayapur. What's his name? Jayapataka Maharaj disciple, one sannyasi, who wrote the book on Srimati Radharani, 2 books. Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj.
Bhakti Purushottam Swami Maharaj.
Yes, Mataji, thank you. Bhakti Purushottam Maharaj. One time he was mentioning about Jagadguru Prabhu. He said, I also take guidance from him because his mind is very stable. I mean, naturally, all senior devotees' minds are very stable, but I just remember. So one of the quality of how does he speak or how does he respond to situation is he sthita pragya respond to every situation in a very stable way. He is not agitated or disturbed. He is equipoised. His mind is very stable. You can say this happened, it's a big thing, and he's like, okay, well, and his mind is not disturbed. So this is one of the quality of a sthita pragya. You cannot disturb him. So man of steady mind, equipoised, and how Krishna explains how he is equipoised because he is free from attachment, fear, and anger. Naturally, when one becomes angry, he is not of a stable, steady mind. When one is attached, he cannot be steady. Like we see how Arjuna became unsteady in this situation. Dhritarashtra became unsteady, or attachment makes us not able to make the right decision. We make a biased decision, and naturally, biased decision, we are bound by karma. So one who is attached uh, cannot have a steady mind. And fear, naturally, when one is fearful, the decisions one makes will be based on fear. And we will be surprised if we reflect on how many decisions I make in my life that are the basis of those decisions are fear of future, fear of children, fear of finances after 10 years, 20 years, fear. How many decisions we make is not based on devotional service to Krishna, it's based on fear of future. So that person can also not be of steady mind. So Krishna says, when one becomes free from attachment, fear, and anger, his mind becomes steady. And he is called Sthita Dhira Muni Uchyate. Krishna says that Muni is called a Sthita Dhira. So this is what is Arjuna's second question. First question of Arjuna is, what are the general characteristics of a Sthita Pragya, self-realized soul? Then he is free from material desires. And he finds happiness in the self alone. He is self-satisfied. And his mind is very stable. And his mind is very stable because he is free from attachment, fear, and anger. Vita raga bhaya krodha. Rag is attachment, bhaya is fear, krodha is anger. Vita means he's free from these things. That's why he's a sthita pragya. And then he is unaffected by good and evil. Whatever good or evil happen doesn't affect him. And Prabhupada explains in the purport, how can a person be free from good and evil? And Prabhupada says, because when something evil happens, a devotee thinks, well, it's a material world anyways. What can we expect from this material world? Corona came, well, it's a material world anyways. So in that way, he's Sthita Pragya, because so many things will happen, which are like, well, this happened. Somebody said, shooting happened in this university. This happened, that happened. Well, this is a material world anyways. So in that way, one become unaffected from good and evil. And also he sees the hand of Krishna. Like personally something happens, Krishna's will. Karma principle again, which is Krishna's will, Krishna sanctioned it. So he sees the hand of Krishna and he knows the duality of this material world. So he remains unaffected by good and evil. So Bhagwan Shri Krishna says, one who is unaffected by good and evil and one who is free from attachment, free from anger, he becomes a Sthita Dhira. And that's how, because he's stable mind, he responds to every situation with a stable mind. And that is a quality of a Sthita Pragya, or a self-realized soul. So this is how he speaks. And the next question Arjuna asks is, how does a Sthita Pragya sit? And how does he sit means, how does the question, Prabhupada says, how does he sit means, how does he restrain his senses? How does he sit means, how does he restrain his senses? And Krishna speaks about Param Drishtva Nivartate to this answer. He is absorbed in a higher transcendental pleasure, so he's not disturbed by external pleasure. And then he says, Krishna gives an example of tortoise, how he withdraws the senses So likewise, a devotee, when there is danger of sense gratification, he withdraws the senses and hates himself. So that's how he sits, or that's how he restrain his senses. That's how he control his senses through higher taste and through withdrawal. In other words, what is the characteristic of a self-realized soul? How does he restrain his senses? He doesn't enter into red zones where his senses may not support him. So, in other words, he doesn't see anything which should not be seen. He doesn't hear anything that should not be heard. He doesn't interact with sense object which should not be interacted. He restrains himself, just like a tortoise restrain his senses. Likewise, a sthita pragya, he is very careful in his dealings with this world. He is not like, I'm a pure devotee, so I can watch anything, I can do anything. But he is always careful in dealing with this world. So that is one characteristic of sthita pragya. Another characteristic is he has a very high taste and he finds pleasure there. And external senses he withdraws. So this is how he sits. Again, this is very important question. What are the various characteristics of sthita pragya or a self-realized soul? And what should be able to have a deep understanding of what are the various characteristics, how he has a stable mind, how he restrained his senses, what are his general characteristics, how he is free from good and evil, how he is free from attachment, fear, and anger, various characteristics of a self-realized soul. And then Krishna takes a detour on speaking about how a sthita pragya restrains from all the senses. Then Krishna says why it is so difficult to restrain the senses. And then he says because the senses are very strong and impetuous and carry away a mind of even a man of discrimination. So Krishna takes a detour because Arjuna asks how general characteristics, how he sits, how he walks, how he speaks. So Krishna spoke about general characteristics, which is no material desires. Then he finds happiness within himself. Okay, then how does he speak? How does he speak? Is how does he respond? How does he speak? By, like when somebody says, how does he speak? Well, he is a very stable mind. That's how Krishna answers. How does he speak? Undisturbed. And why he is undisturbed? Because he's free from attachment, fear, and anger. And he is undisturbed because he is free from good and evil aspect of things. So that's how he responds. In other words, that's how we speak. Everything he speak is based on these inherent characteristics. Okay, then how does he sit? How does he sit means how does he remain stable in his consciousness? Or how does he restrain his senses? He does not. How does he restrain his senses? He withdraws the senses. He does not let the senses be exposed to the sources of agitation. Just like a tortoise withdraws his senses, and then he is satisfied within himself by a param drishtva, by a higher taste. But then Krishna says why it is so important, why a sthita pragya does that, because the senses are very strong, and one should not trust the senses or the mind. One should never trust one mind and senses. We see at the stage of bhava also, we see Bharat Maharaj was affected in his mind. So at whatever stage of devotion, this is one characteristic of a self-realized soul. He does not trust the mind and senses. Because Krishna says, because they are very powerful, carry away the mind of even a man of discrimination. And then we hear Prabhupada says in purport, no other process works. Durvasa Muni became agitated, wanted to kill Ambarish Maharaj by a slight provocation in his mind, the thought that he did not respect me. Vishwamitra Muni, after thousands of sacrifice, was immediately impacted. Menaka came and Shakuntala was born. So we hear how other processes for a very long time doesn't really work because the senses are so strong and impetuous. So Vishwamitra Muni is not ordinary person. Durvasa Munis are not ordinary people. They are like, they have such powers that they can give any curses and anything will happen. So they are very powerful people, but they could not control their senses, mind and senses, which is not because of them, which is because the process they follow. So Prabhupada says artificial enunciation, Gyan Yoga, it doesn't work, but a Krishna conscious person can make it. And like Haridas Thakur and prostitute Yamunacharya and spitting at the thought, different thing Prabhupada says how Krishna conscious person can have control over senses, which are very powerful, but that does not mean, so they are able to withdraw. This is one of their characteristic. Haridas Thakur, when he saw the prostitute, he was able to withdraw his mind and absorb in a higher taste, which is continuous chanting of Hare Krishna mantra. So these are the two characteristics of self-realized soul. They withdraw the senses inwardly and focus on the higher taste. Param, that's why Krishna spoke two verses, Param Drishtva Nivartate and the tortoise. And then later on, Krishna also speaks, as wind sweeps away the boat, one of the roaming senses sweeps away the mind. Like if there's a wind and there's a boat and wind comes and sweeps away. Likewise, if a senses roam, then mind will be captured. Even one of the senses, the mind will be captured by that. And then Krishna speaks about the anatomy of fall down, that the Vishan Pumsham devotees may want to have the understanding of what happens when by meditation attachment develops, lust develops, anger develops, and those two verses devotees can go more in detail. Not going in detail now because I'm sure devotees know about it. And then I think we are at probably the last or second last slide. How does he walk? I think this is the last slide. So we saw how does general characteristics. We saw how he speaks. We saw how he sits by restraining the senses, how he speaks with a stable mind, how we attain stable mind. We discussed general characteristics, inward happiness, and no material desires. And so how he sits, restrain the senses is so important because they are very powerful. And then different things Krishna spoke about fall down begins with contemplation of the senses on the sense object. That's the fall that happens. So Asthita Pragya, self-realized soul, is very cautious of restraining the senses like a tortoise. And finally, how he walks. So that implies how he handles his senses. Controls his senses through regulative principles of freedom. And Prabhupada discuss how these principles are principles of freedom. He regulates his senses or follow the regulative principles very strictly. That's how he handles. And free from attachment and aversion. Then Prabhupada says, how can one become free from attachment and aversion? So he says, if Krishna wants, he can do anything. Whether he likes to do something or he doesn't like to do something, if Krishna wants him to do something, he will do it. That's one way to overcome aversion attachment, is I will do what Guru wants, I will do what Krishna wants, independent of what I want. Also, we will see in 6th chapter, Prabhupada says one can control the mind by superior intelligence, which comes in the form of instruction by Guru and Krishna. Devotees want, Guru wants, Krishna wants, I will do it. My liking, disliking doesn't matter. So that's one way a self-realized soul acts. Like we see all pure devotees, our spiritual master is doing what Prabhupada wants, what pleases Srila Prabhupada, what pleases Sri Krishna Bhagavan. So if Krishna wants, he can do anything. If Krishna doesn't want, he abstains from what he would have ordinarily done for his own satisfaction. If he wants to do something, but if he knows this Krishna doesn't want, so he doesn't do it. So in that way, one becomes free from attachment and aversion. So that's how he walks. Like when Arjuna says how he walks means how he handles himself. What are his activities? His activities is whatever Krishna wants. His activities is he's free from attachment and aversion. And his activities is he's very strict in following the regulative principles of freedom. Whatever needs to be done, he will do. Whatever is not need to be done, he will not do. So that's how he works, or that's how he walks. Okay, so that's the end. And those who are able to follow the qualities of Sthita Pragya, they second last verse in second chapter, Krishna speaks about that desires are flowing like rivers into the ocean, but the ocean is not agitated by the river. Likewise, so many desires will enter into the mind, and the Sthita Pragya is not affected by all the desires. In this way, he lives a godly life and make his destiny back home, back to Godhead. And that's the summary of second chapter. Okay, so not bad. It's 1 hour 15 minutes. So are there any discussion? How are we feeling? Was it helpful by any means?
Yes, Prabhuji, very helpful.
Yes, Prabhuji.
The whole gist and summary has been given. Thank you so much.
Okay. So are there
Yes,
any?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, summary is really work, Prabhuji. It's very good, Prabhuji. Very nicely summarized, Prabhuji, verse chapter 1 and 2.
Well, all glories to devotees who have done the homework and is repeating what the work they have done. Okay. If there are no discussion, we can end here. Next week, we will summarize in a similar way chapter 3 and 4 and release the first assignment. Okay. Thank you all very much. Vancha kalpa taru bhascha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anantapati Vaishnavindu ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Did anybody ask any question or they just said Hare Krishna? Thank you very much. Dandavat Pranam, Prabhuji's Mata.
Dandavat Pranam,
Thank you,
Prabhuji. Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Prabhuji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you
Dhanyavad.
very much.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.